I just wanted to say we. Hey, I was asked today to come introduce my brother, and I was told 2 times last week and probably a half dozen times this morning I had to be clean. So it was going to be all along for the people. In case people thought that I wasn't capable of that, I am. So I could have introduced him one of three ways. One is with our buddies would have been a much different introduction, and then if it was just he, Brent, or Brandon and I, would have been an even better introduction. And so to you all, it'll be the utmost respect and very well delivered. Brent is my younger brother by 2.5 years. So there's about 5 years between myself and Brandon. Brent somewhere right in the middle. He is what most believe, including Edith, is the best looking one of the three of us. And obviously stepped his game up on his dress, because that's usually where he stumbles very, very good. So today he looks better than he normally does. Brent is a graduate of J.R. Tucker, and we argue about this all the time. I have him graduating VCU in just shy of a decade. I think that he went every year for about a decade. He walked from Blackburn to VCU. He said he did it in 4 years. I'm calling friendly fire on that. He is now employed by Henrico County Public Schools after working several years for our father. He is married to Ann. He is the father of 3, Michaela, who is my least favorite niece, Chad, and the new baby, Brooklyn, and the stepfather of Shelby and Lindsay. He is a person of faith that grew up in this church like the rest of us did. Mom and Dad started bringing him here, I'm sure, when he was born. He's been here ever since. Some of his hobbies include pulling for all the wrong sports teams, watching sports, and he still does some collectibles, probably little dolls or something like he did when we were kids. But it is my honor to introduce my brother, Brent.
Well, I have to say, after that introduction, it's going to be hard to follow that up. However, I will let him know and set the record straight. It was not a decade at VCU. It was a little over 5 years, which is okay. And, when he brings that up, I always like to remind him that his wife, Linda, would constantly come to my defense because she completed her college career at VCU in the exact same amount of time. So if he's going to give me some grief about it, I'd like to see him give Linda the same grief. However, I don't think that will happen. That being said, it was a few weeks ago, probably 5-6 weeks ago, that I received a phone call from Bill. And it's not uncommon for me to get a phone call from Bill from time to time to talk church issues, or for him to check in to see how things are going with me, how things are going with Ann, how things are going with the baby. So, I just figured it was a routine call, just calling, to check, see how things were going. What he was calling, though, to ask is, he said, Brent, you've been through a lot here lately, and I think you have a pretty unique story to tell, and that a lot to share. And he said, would you like to be the speaker on Baptist Men's Sunday? And I said, emphatically, of course, I would be happy to do so. There wasn't, a moment's hesitation. I said, I'd love to do it. Now, some of you may know or may remember that it was a little over 25 years ago, probably more 27 years ago, I believe, I delivered a sermon on what we had was our first Youth Sunday. So that many years ago, I was standing in this same position, getting ready to deliver a sermon. Now, on that same Sunday as well, I also made my public profession of faith. So that day, really it's really in my heart, because on that day I did accept my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into my life. Now, contrary to what Bubba might think, when he made a comment about my dress, no, this is not the same suit that I was wearing on that particular Sunday 27 years ago. Although, to be honest, I think I only threw that suit out about maybe a few months ago before we moved, when I was cleaning my closet out. But Bubba might be jealous that same suit still fit me to that day. I just figured at that point, it's a little shiny in a few spots, and I said it's time to get rid of that thing. So yeah, after a few days, after I talked to Bill, I started thinking. I said, okay, let me brainstorm some ideas about how I want to present my message, what I want to say, what I want to share. Several things that kept coming to the surface when I was doing this brainstorming, this thinking was, but I started thinking about how life is and how there's so many peaks and valleys, and we all experience these. We experience the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and a lot of in between. We also face a lot of challenges. Some of them in our daily life, and some of them greater than others, and some of them may seem trivial to some. But in the end, the good things that we have in our life will outweigh the bad, especially, if we've lived a life that's good and we've done the right things and have, treated people fairly. Life's going to look out for us. I also started thinking about how in these valleys that we experience, a lot of times our faith is tested and pushed sometimes further than what we would like it to be pushed, and we're challenged a little greater in that area than we'd want to be. Now, when I started thinking about my topic for my sermon, or something I could base it off, one night I happened to be flipping through the channels on TV, and one of my favorite movies was on. That was the movie Forrest Gump, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that movie. But if you're not, it's a movie with Tom Hanks where he plays a man who is mentally challenged, and but he goes through life, and his entire life he experiences all these great things. He experiences all these famous individuals, and he even meets a couple of presidents along the way. The thing is, he doesn't realize the significance of anything that's going on around him. He just realized these are just normal people, and this is just an ordinary occurrence to him. So to him, it's nothing really great. He even finds himself in the middle of some of the biggest historical events of the 60s and 70s, and of course he doesn't have any idea that they're historical events. Anyway, the movie is told from his perspective as he's sitting on a bench at a bus stop, and as people come, sit down on the bench, he starts to have conversations with them and starts telling them about his life. Now, some of these people engage him and others don't. Some just brush it off as, this guy's making crazy talk, I don't want to pay attention to him. Well, anyway, at one point a lady comes and sits down next to him. I believe she was a nurse, and she's reading a book, so he begins talking to her, and she's kind of, just to be polite, looks at him and nods her head a few times, but she's not really paying attention to him. Well, at that point, he begins to talk about his mom, and of course, like I said, the woman's not paying attention. But he looks at the woman and he says, he said, my mama always had a saying. He said that she used to tell him that life was like a box of chocolates. He said, you never know what you're going to get. And I started thinking, you know what, I said, that sounds like a pretty good sermon topic right there. I said, I think I can work with that based off of my life experiences and, the things that I've gone through and encountered in my life. Now, of course, if most of you are familiar with how a box of chocolates is put together, you open it up, and most of them have like a little layout in there that tells you what everything is, so that when you reach in, you know exactly what you're ready to pick up. But as the box, gets less and gets less full and less full, you start eating the chocolates out. Sometimes the chocolates get mixed up. You look in there, you're not exactly sure what it is that's sitting in that one spot. You think that it's this, but it might be something else. You can't always tell what you're about to bite into. Now, as a kid, I know that was frustrating for me, because as any kid knows, you don't want to pick up a piece of chocolate and have it filled with raspberry cream or something crazy like that. You just want pure chocolate. So you bite into it and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't like this. So you kind of bite into it, and we'd stick it back in the box. Figure at some point, I don't like it, so no one else will really like it, but you didn't think to throw it away. You just stuck it back in the box. But for me, it was just give me plain old chocolate. And anyway, getting back to the story now, Forrest Gump's mom, I think, was really on to something when she said life was like a box of chocolates. Because truly in life, we don't know what we're going to get from day to day. Each day brings its own new experiences and challenges. Sometimes life seems like that box when it's brand new and full. You open it up, everything's in its place. You reach into that box and with confidence, knowing that the piece you pick up is what it is. As for life, we know exactly where we're going at this point. We know what we're doing. We know everything's good for us. Also, there are other times when life is like that box that's kind of maybe half full, or maybe just a few pieces missing. we reach into the box and we're fairly confident that what we're picking up is what it is. We're like, okay, but we may bite into that piece of chocolate a little bit slower, apprehensive that maybe, someone put it in the wrong spot. But, thinking, okay, I'm pretty certain what I'm going to eat is, the piece of chocolate I wanted. This point in life is mostly in order, and there's some changes going on. There's a few challenges, but there's nothing we can't adapt to. This, I think, is what most people would say is what daily life is like. Nothing too big, nothing too small, but we're able to manage and deal with things. Then there are those times when life is like that box where there's basically just a few pieces of candy left in the box. Things are scattered. There's a lot of things missing. The best of the candy has been eaten. The worst of it's been left behind. So we grab a piece, but we're unsure whether we want to bite into it because of fear of, what might be in the middle. We may try a bite, or we may break it open to see what's in there. But more times than not, we want to put it back. These are the times, I think, that when life goes not as planned. These are the times when things really change and things are not great. They're not the way we want them to be. There's a great challenge before us. We're scared. We're nervous. We're unsure of what we're going to do to overcome these events that are happening in our lives. Things seem to be darkest, and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel at this point. Now, we've all experienced highs and lows in our life. And that's just the way life works. There's no way around it. What I want to do is share with you a few of mine, especially the ones over the past 6.5, 7 years of my life, because I feel at this point in my life there's probably been a lot of greater challenges. There's been greater life-changing events and things that just, in that short window of time, I've had a lot going on. Most of you know, a little over 6 years ago, at that point, I had just become a recently divorced father of 2 young children. Now, most would say that in today's America, that's really not an uncommon occurrence, and that made me, amongst the large group of people in this country that are facing that same situation. It's a shame that we've come to the point in our country, but that's the reality of modern-day America. This event started and set into motion what would happen to me over up to this current date. But the one thing about, going through that experience was I realized there was the reality that I would no longer see my children on a daily basis. That was going to be a huge change for me to overcome. It also meant that, these changes, it was life altering. You're used to waking up in the morning, waking up your children, giving your children a hug before they go off to school, and that part was going to change. I thought that I would never be able to adjust to that, and to some extent I really haven't. However, as time goes on, you create schedules, routines are created, and life starts to have some sense of normalcy again. So what I want to do then is fast forward a couple more years. At this point, I found myself in another situation that was not uncommon of the times. At that point, our country was facing the worst economic times that we had probably seen in 30 years or more. And we were faced with the reality that our family business would be closing. Now, most of you know, I was employed there for 20 years, so that was the only job that I had really ever known. That was part of my routine, was waking up, going to Blackburn, working with my dad, working with the crazy folks that worked there all these years, and it was a wonderful place to be. But you wake up one morning and you're faced with the reality that the place that you had known as your only place of employment, and a place that you had, as a younger man, had thought that that's where I was going to be till my retirement age, was going to be gone. At that point, I had the unenviable task of trying to seek employment in probably the worst job market that I can ever recall. And just, it was a tight labor market. It was, people were in my same situation looking for a job. There were people with college degrees like myself that were going out. They couldn't even get a foot in the door, couldn't get an interview with places because there were so many of us out there. I spent many a day and many a month. You fill out applications, you send out resumes, you do all these things, but no response. And when you did get a response or an interview, you'd go in and do it, and you may not hear anything for 2-3 months, and then you get the news that they'd offered the position to someone else. So I was doing everything I could do to try to make sure that, I took care of myself, took care of my bills, took care of my children. And I'd like to, I'd say that the thing that made it so easy to get through this time was the fact I had help from my parents. They were always there for me. My other parts of my family, my brothers, their wives, aunts, uncles, cousins were constantly checking in on me to say, hey, what do you need? Is there anything we can do for you? Also, my friends, I had friends checking on leads for jobs, checking on with their friends to see if they positions open, places where they were employed. But, a lot of that was to no avail. But finally, a little over a year later, that search was over. At that point, I was lucky enough to be able to find a new job and get back on my feet and a chance to start anew. But it was a quite humbling experience going through that, and it gave me a greater perspective on being appreciative for the things that you've got at that time, as well as the fact that, when you've got a job, appreciate it. Don't take it for granted because it can be gone in a moment's notice. In August 2010 of that year, as my brother Bubba shared, I began to work at a middle school in Henrico County. So it was quite a change from what I'd been doing. But it was also here that I would meet my future wife, Ann. So at this point, I was in a pretty good spot. I'd met this woman who would go on to be my wife. So I was in a good spot. Now I want to move forward again, and this time we're going to jump all the way to this past August. Now this past August was going to be a busy month no matter which way we looked at it. There were a lot of major events that were happening in my life that month. Number one, we were moving into a new home. Number two, we were getting married August 10th. At the end of that month, both Ann and I would be returning to work, so our summer vacation was over, our summer with the kids was going to end, and we were expecting our first child together this coming December. So you could probably say that August was just a tad bit full. Well, after these, we got moved into the house best we could. We had a lot of help getting everything moved in, getting things set up, taken care of. A couple weeks after we moved in, we had the wedding. The wedding we had wanted something simple, but Misty decided to jump in at some point, and Misty's not here, but Misty jumped in and said, hey, I want to help you. You can have your wedding here, and, I'll take care of doing all these things. And so Misty went into her event planning mode, and Brandon was a little stressed about it because there were things that he needed to do that he didn't really want to do, and money being spent that, quite honestly, he said, why am I spending money? It's your wedding, So we went through that, but Misty made it elaborate. It was going to be an outdoor wedding. But as luck would have it, in August in Richmond, you get thunderstorms. We had a thunderstorm come through, knock the power out. So here it was, 95 degrees, high humidity, no electricity. It's raining, Misty's stressing out because this isn't right. There were bags of mulch that needed to be brought in to fix these things. I was like, we can walk through the mud, we can put a tarp down. And she said, this ain't no kind of redneck wedding. Nobody is walking across a tarp. So I was like, okay, whatever. Well, anyway, going through this, we moved the wedding inside. Her neighbors came over, started to help. We had candles put in the background. God bless Bill. He was there officiating. He was backed up against those 400 candles that her neighbors had lit across the back. And there were moments when I thought he was going to pass out. Poor guy was sweating profusely, and it didn't look good for him. But we persevered. We made it through. He told me after the ceremony, he said, look, I cut a few things out. I hope you don't mind, but I was afraid I was going to pass out. And I said, God bless you, Bill. You did what you needed to do. You adapted, and you overcame. So, everything at that point seemed like everything was going well. Everything was great. At the end of the month, Ann went to the doctor's appointment. At that point, the doctor said, the word that no pregnant woman wants to hear, you're on bed rest. She said, are you okay? I guess I could adapt to this. School had yet to begun, so she hadn't started the school year. And up to this point, it had been a normal pregnancy, so this was kind of unexpected. We had no idea that, this was going to happen, and it popped up. So we're like, okay, we're going to proceed, and we're going to make the best of this. Well, this is not how we envisioned this pregnancy to go, and I'm sure that's not how anyone envisions any pregnancy to go. You think it's going to carry it all the way to the due date, and you're able to go out and do everything that you need to do, get things done. Well, we had yet to really get the baby's room totally set up, and we still had plenty to do. We made the adjustments, though, to our schedules and the adjustment to our lives, and proceeded to move forward. to make things work. Well, later that September, Ann goes to another doctor's appointment. This time, she was placed in the hospital to be monitored. Well, you can imagine my surprise when she said, looked at me, she said, everything's going to be okay. I need you to go home. Everything's going to be fine. Stay with the kids. I'll call you if anything happens or if anything changes. I go home, sitting there, get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, panic strikes at 2 o'clock in the morning when you get any phone call. Pick the phone call up. She calls. She says, don't panic. I don't want you to freak out. Well, the first thing I do is start freaking out. She said, my water is broken, but the doctor says you need to get on up here to the hospital. We may be having this baby tonight. But take your time. Don't get into a hurry. Nothing's is imminent, but get up here. Get up to the hospital, and I did take my time, by the way. Even took the time to go take a shower. She told me, said, make sure you're ready. So I was make sure I was good and awake. Well, when I got there, they went ahead and admitted Ann to the hospital, and there, of course, was the potential for the baby to be born at any time. So here I am panicking a little bit, about what are we going to do? This baby is premature. All the challenges that come with that. Well, as what we ended up with is a situation where the baby was in low fluid. Ann needed constant monitoring. The baby needed constant monitoring. And they said that was going to be the norm all the way up until the time the baby was born. Our goal at that point, the doctors from the NICU were telling us, is we wanted to make it to 34 weeks. At that point, I believe we were roughly at 20, we were in the later 20s as far as the number of weeks we were facing. So we weren't out of the home stretch yet, but the folks from the NICU would come over and consult with us, tell us what we should expect if the baby was born at this week, and they would come and consult with us next. Well, this created a whole new set of stressors because here we were, a newlywed couple. Here I was, a newlywed. I had my wife. She was in the hospital. She was pregnant with our unborn child. She was away from her kids. Then there were going to be trips to the hospital back and forth each day so that we could come visit. How were we going to fit those into our schedule? How were we going to adapt? How was I going to get meals ready every night? How was I going to take on the task of making sure that all the kids' needs were met and my needs were met and her needs were met? And then there were worries about Ann's health and Brooklyn's health and, are they going to be okay? Are they going to be healthy? Well, on October 23rd, our daughter, Brooklyn Elizabeth, was born. Now, when she came out, it was through a cesarean section. The doctors came over, showed us the baby. They were like, hey, here's your baby. Ann's big thing was, I want to be able to touch my baby before you take her out. They allowed her to touch Brooklyn, allowed us to snap a couple pictures. The baby was out. At that point, of course, they took her straight to the NICU. And at first, I'm going to be honest with you, that was scary when they take your child and they take her right away. And then you've got to wait hours before you're able to go see your newborn child. Well, the first time we go into the NICU, I'm going to tell you, I was a bit overwhelmed. You walk in, there's all these bells, whistles, beeps, and buzzers going off, and people running back and forth, checking on things. But nobody's really in a panic. Everyone's moving at their pace. Everything was going well. Well, at that point, after Brooklyn was born and Ann was still remaining in the hospital, and through all of this, we had help from our family. We had help from friends. The kids stepped up in a big way and really started doing things that for kids their age, they didn't need to be doing, but they stepped up and were making things happen. Co-workers at work were checking in. Our church family you guys were fabulous. You checked in on us constantly. You made sure our needs were being met, or if there were needs that we needed met, that you took care of those. We had friends that provided food so that we could have a meal, so that I didn't have to worry about trying to cook something which I cannot cook, I'll be honest with you. There were also a lot of prayers. There were prayers from those, from the staff in the hospital. There were prayers from our congregation. There were prayers from family. There were prayers from friends. And there were just prayers abounding left and right. Now, while Ann and Brooklyn remained in the hospital, we still had these people checking in on us. It was a great feeling to know that people cared and people stepped up and were willing to help out. But, the one thing people would come to me and they'd say, how are you, Brent? How are you doing? And the answer I always gave was always the same answer. I would say, I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there. Things are all right. But you see, that's exactly what I thought everyone expected to hear. that's what I thought that people wanted to hear from me, that, they're like, Brent's got this, he can do this. He's a strong person, he can handle it. And I wanted to appear strong. I wanted to appear strong for my wife, for my kids, my family, and for my friends. I wanted to let them know that, hey, I can handle this. I had convinced myself that I can handle everything that was going on. But there were too many emotions and too much stress going on for me to honestly say that I really handled it the way it should have been handled. You see, there were a lot of things that I internalized. There were a lot of things that I shut other people out on. There were things that I kept inside that, in hindsight, I wished I would have shared or would have said, felt that it was okay to say, you know what, today things aren't going so great. I don't feel so great. I'm having a hard time dealing with this. It was hard for me to come to grips with that I was able to tell people that everything was going great and, things weren't always that well with me inside, because I was struggling with it. And, it's been pretty tough to deal with to get through that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know who wouldn't stress about that. In hindsight, I'm thinking, it's okay to have been stressed and to be feeling these emotions, because, let's admit, my wife was in the hospital, my newborn child was in the hospital, and there were a lot of unknowns whether or not everyone was going to be okay and make it through this okay. I also wanted to try to maintain some normalcy at home. I figured by doing this, it would make things easier on the kids and would make things easier for me, but it really didn't. Inside I was scared, I was nervous, I was anxious, and I had a lot of uncertainty as to what was going to happen. And I started dealing with what ifs instead of dealing with the things that were and the things that I knew. I had the support of so many people, and for that I know that God played a role in that He placed these people before me, a wonderful family, pastor that I love dearly, that I also like to call a friend, a church family that's always there for those in need, friends that have always stepped up and have always been there for me, and co-workers that have done the same, that were phenomenal and did so many things and checked in on me on a daily basis at work. I also feel at times that maybe in some ways, my faith wasn't as strong as it needed to be, because I know God was at work. There were folks praying, and I know that prayer works. And I was hearing these people telling me, hey, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for Ann, I'm praying for Brooklyn, I'm praying for your family. But I don't know if I was truly hearing what they were saying, or if I was letting the fact of what I was seeing before me cloud my vision as to what was really happening, that God was at work. Because trust me, God was at work through the hands of those doctors and nurses and the labor and delivery wing of St. Mary's and in the NICU for the phenomenal things that they were doing. God willing, everything worked out in the end. Now I could see after going through all this that the works of God and the hands of God were at play the entire time that Ann and Brooklyn were in the hospital, and the entire time that I was dealing with this and the emotions and the stress of all these things. At this point, I look, Brooklyn is a healthy, happy 3-month-old. She's changing daily. She's growing. She's happy. She smiles. And she's just a true blessing in our lives. I can also see that God was at work because, my wife, God bless her, was able to deal with the stresses of everything that she was going through. Because here I was stressed out about this and going through these things when I'm the one that wasn't laying in the hospital bed. I wasn't the one dealing with the physical pain of having to go through this. I was not the one that was pulled away from her family and placed in the hospital. But through all of this, she was a true testament to God because of the way she was able to persevere and the way she was able to step up and, just do these wonderful things and to pull through this. And, for that, I'm deeply grateful to her for the strength that she showed. And she's truly my strength and my rock. And the fact that she was able to do this and deliver our child and keep our child healthy and happy, or just to bring her into this world healthy and with the challenges that she faced, I'm grateful to her, but I'm grateful to God for looking out for us and taking care of her and meeting our needs. Now, in today's scripture, real quickly, I just want to touch base on this. It was from the book of James, and the reason I looked at this scripture and started thinking, what is the text that I'm going to use or have delivered today? In that portion of James, and I'm going to flip to that real quick, it was about the faith that we need to show, because this book was written to believers and for believers. As it was noted, it was to the members of the 12 tribes that were scattered, and they were scattered because they were being persecuted. It's an outline. The entire book is an outline for the believer's faith walk. It's also, I guess you could say, a how-to guide about faith and what we need to do as believers to maintain our faith. And they're very relevant for today. Verses 2 through 4, it says, "Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." It's very clear what James is saying there. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when you face trials and challenges. Because we know life is going to throw those at us. But the result of facing those through Christ is going to be patience. Patience that God grants us. Patience to wait these things out. And patience to reach the end and see everything through, and to see that God truly is at work. Verses 5 through 8, quickly. "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways." When our faith wavers, sometimes we do get unstable, and we do start to doubt. But we're human, and we're not perfect. And I'll tell you, through everything that I've been through these last few years, I realized, most importantly, that I am not perfect. That I have my faults, but I face challenges just like anyone else does. But it's who you place your faith in when you're going through those challenges determines how you are going to come out on the other end. Are you going to come out stronger in your faith? Are you going to come out a stronger person, happier than you were going in? Through God, we know that to be true. We know that is, you put your faith in God, all your needs and wants will be taken care of. All those burdens on your heart will be lifted, and God will be there and place His loving hand upon you. I've also learned through this experience that I'm a blessed man. I have a lot of things that I need to be thankful for. There are a lot of blessings in my life, and just real quickly, I want to share a few. And the majority of these blessings I have are the people that I have in my life. Once again, I'll tell you, I'm blessed to have a pastor in Bill who is caring and loving, but one that I can call friend. And for that, Bill, I thank you. I have a lifelong friend, Eric, who's always been there with me through everything that I've been through my challenges, and I've been there with him through a lot of his challenges. There are not a lot of us that can say that we have lifelong friends. We grew up in this church together from when we were very small all the way through it. And for that, Eric, I'm thankful for your friendship. I thank you for the blessings that you are to me, the fact that I've got a friend that's been there with me for 42 years, 41 years. Would you be 42 next month, right? So 41. My co-workers. I am blessed to work with a wonderful group of people at the school that I'm in. These people fed me through all this. They gave me food to take home. People made meals. People checked in on me daily to say, hey, how are things going? What can we do for you? What do you need? My extended family, aunts and uncles, cousins. I'm part of two wonderful families. And I'm very thankful that I'm a part of those families. It's been truly a blessing to be a part of such wonderful people that care for one another. My parents, mom and dad, thank you for everything you've ever done for me. You've always been there for me. You've always stepped up when I needed you, and you continue to this day, and for that I love you and thank you. Blessed with 2 brothers. Even though that there are times where we would fight like cats and dogs, there were also times we were best friends, and to this day we're best friends. We've always seek to be together, do things together, and we're close. And for that, guys, I'm thankful that I have 2 brothers that I'm close with, that have been there with me and for me my entire life. 2 sisters-in-laws who have always looked out for me, done a lot of great things for me, helped me out in times of need. Blessed that I had grandparents that taught me so much. A grandfather that taught me the value of hard work, taught me the value of family and what it was to take care of people and look out for people, those that you didn't always quite know. Another grandmother that showed me what it was to have true love for your family when she adopted and welcomed in 5 of her own grandchildren and adopted them as her own and raised them as her own. Showed me love. Another grandmother who many of you knew, my grandmother, we called her Grandma, that sat in those pews for years, serving the children of this church. She taught me what it was to serve the Lord. She did it with gladness. She was here every Sunday. She worked with the children of our church, and she was truly a blessing to have in my life. She also taught me another thing. I never knew that it was possible to drive a car full of your friends across an outfield at a softball game and not know that you were doing it. She taught me that was possible. I never knew it to that point. And here recently I've been blessed to have welcomed 2 stepdaughters into my family. 2 stepdaughters that have accepted me into their life and showed me love, and that, I am a part of their life and I am there with them. My children, Chad, Michaela, I love you both dearly. There's and I just can't say enough about you guys. You're truly a blessing in my life. My newest daughter, Brooklyn, truly a blessing from God. She was brought here and brought in under unfortunate circumstances as far as being, stuck in the NICU and having to fight her way to survive. But God bless her, she made it. She was a fighter from day one, and I think she's going to be a fighter through her entire life.